Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, your Equinox News Recap podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Hope. I'm the managing executive editor of the Equinox.
And I'm Chloe Erno, the news editor.
And I hope if you're listening that you had a wonderful spring break, a little relaxation from all the busyness of classes and things like that. I know I had a pretty good break, but we did have a lot of news to go over still that we were working on over the course of that. A lot of our amazing staffers and e-board putting in the work still, despite the days off. So, yeah, I didn't really have any other announcements, so we could just get right into the recap here. The top story news is from our staffer, Sam Menard, and this is a follow-up on a piece we previously did about the Cheshire Academy for Lifelong Learning call program and the latest developments with that. When we first reported on the call program status, they were trying to see if they would potentially be able to get a shortened spring session in after staff reductions had made it so no one was sort of in charge of overseeing the program. And so there was kind of uncertainty about if it was going to happen or not or when. But now we have a follow-up, which is that they're going to try to get a part-time coordinator for the fall. And we have some quotes in here from Interim President Burks and also from the provost about them sort of confirming that they do think that the program is important and that they're looking for ways to make sure that it is sustainable. So some encouraging news on that end.
Yeah, and the first time around, I did get to speak to about 3 call participants, and I was really happy to hear from them and just their experiences with the program. And it does make me sad to see that it's gone on hold for spring, but we're hopeful about the fall right now and getting a fall semester in for them. I really hope they can get a coordinator for the program over the summer or at the start of the fall so they can continue it, but we'll see what happens.
Right, and for those who don't know, CALL is a program that's mainly geared towards community members, retired folks in the community who want to sort of continue learning, but maybe at their own more relaxed pace rather than like solely trying to gain credit or like a degree. It's just sort of an enriching activity and community building thing that Keene State has offered for quite a few years now. And although participation in the program, much like enrollment, has sort of declined, it is still quite important to a lot of the participants, as we've seen in our reporting. So, obviously the hope is that they're able to sort of hire that part-time coordinator and then rework the program in order to make sure that it's financially feasible to continue. But, there's sort of, taking the good with the bad with this one. It's not all negative news, although it is unfortunate about the spring semester, but we'll keep you posted on what happens next with that. But we can go into our top story in Region State now, which is a piece from the Keene Sentinel about some of the city of Keene's plans when it comes to downtown infrastructure, what they want to sort of get done. We've been talking about, not just us specifically, but there's been talks for years now about a massive downtown infrastructure overhaul. And obviously that would impact students a lot, as downtown is sort of the main hub of businesses, employment opportunities, things like that for students, especially if you don't have a car on campus. So they're looking to do a few main things. Probably the biggest ticket thing or most urgent is some of these like piping concerns when it comes to water. I know underneath sort of the main area in downtown, like the roundabout, there is like some pipes that are like wooden pipes from like over 100 years ago, which is wild to think about. So redoing the piping and making sure that that's safe. And then there's some other things too as well, such as a solar pavilion on Gilboa Avenue. So installing solar panels to make more energy efficient output. There's redesigning of Lower Winchester Street. So that includes roundabouts and bike and pedestrian paths, some more work on West Street, and then some work on Robin Hood Park. So I just figured, there wasn't too many stories this week in the region selection that have to particularly do with higher ed, but I think something like this is certainly relevant to students.
Yeah, and I agree definitely. I don't have a car on campus this semester, so that is kind of like the only space I can go is downtown or like to the Walmart area. So it will definitely impact students like me who use that for their main hub of business. Like, you get food from there, you go down there just to hang out. Personally, I'm excited for some of these changes. I think there's going to be improvements being made to the downtown area, but I think it's very important to just report on it, because that is going to directly affect students who use those areas.
Right, yeah, it's one of those things where sort of everyone acknowledges pretty much wherever you go in this country that there's infrastructure needs in one place or another, and it's, these projects that kind of get deferred and, tossed around for years and years, and they don't ever actually go to, work and completion, because there's just so many logistical things that need to happen in order for it to work out. So obviously the hope is that the work will actually kick into full gear, and it'll be obviously difficult and to a certain aspect to sort of inhibit some traffic things and move things around, as to what they usually are when it comes to like during construction. But obviously it's for the greater good in the end, so we're hopeful that these things will get done, and the city will be better off for it. But with that being said, we can get into our top story in student life, which was a piece about course registration. So course registration is really kind of in full swing as of the recording of this episode on Thursday, March 26th. And I'm not personally registering for courses anymore. I'm a graduating senior, but I do know there's a lot of different things when it comes to course registration this year, particularly the switch over from the ISP Integrative Studies program to the General Education Explorations program. So if you don't know, before courses had the I prefix, so you had like an IH for like a humanities course that fulfills a requirement in that area. Now we have different tags, so they're kind of in the process of switching over course titles and prefixes, to sort of match with this new curriculum overhaul when it comes to what are the new areas of general education, and that's been worked on for a few years at least, and now is sort of ultimately coming to fruition. We're kind of in like this transition period, which is why it can be a little bit awkward, but what I did really appreciate is we put in the paper a little like guide in terms of like, if this course was tagged as this before, now it's going to look like this. So advisors do have like the materials in terms of what to tell students, but it is a sort of wrinkle in a process that a lot of people already have a lot of thoughts about.
Yeah, and I work down student academic support, so I've seen a lot of people come in to speak with advisors about course registration. I've booked a few appointments for some students. When I was planning my classes, I know there was some confusion about the ISP courses and how those are going to function going to the next semester. And not all the opinions I've heard about that have necessarily been positive about how they rearranged it. I do think it does make things confusing for students, especially ones who are doing their courses mostly themselves. And it makes just the entire system a bit harder to navigate in general and know what credits you need. I think as time goes on and they clarify, it'll be much easier to understand, but at the current time, it is kind of making things more difficult for students.
Yeah, as with anything, these like major changes that happen, it doesn't ever hurt to be more sort of upfront about all of like the things and like the reasonings behind why this happened and what people should really know, and like how those things match up from the previous system to now. Obviously in like future classes, this will be the only thing that they know, so it won't be really that confusing for them. But for those who sort of knew what the ISP program was before and switching that over, and all of like the substitutions and things that have to be made, it is, it can be pretty confusing, I think, for people. So I think it's really just up to, whoever it may be, academic deans or the provost or advisors or whoever can sort of educate the student body about what these changes mean, because ultimately, the transition over is not going to be the cleanest ever, but hopefully it'll be more smoothly run in future years. But yeah, there's kind of good and bad in this article when it comes to like student opinion. Some people didn't really express that they had any particular issues with the registration. Some people, also did have issues and sort of expressed, the issues that kind of occur about scheduling and things like that. But some really in-depth reporting on an issue that affects all students trying to register for courses. But with that being said, we can get into our editorial, which this week was sort of a discussion that relates to a couple of the previous editorials we've done revolving around immigration policy under the Trump administration. This one particularly is about the new DHS Secretary, Markwayne Mullin, former senator from Oklahoma, who just recently got confirmed to the post of DHS Secretary. And he was questioned by Senator from New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan, about if he would rule out putting an ice facility in New Hampshire. We've talked about before on this podcast the news that was happening with the Merrimack ice facility and how ultimately that got shot down at the state level, rejecting it, and also local officials rejecting it. But this question was specifically just about anywhere in New Hampshire at all. Would you rule out putting an ice facility in New Hampshire? And he didn't really say no. He kind of said that he would talk with local leaders about it, which is a sort of vague cop-out answer to that question, and kind of leaves open the door to something that we already have seen, at least when it comes to the case of Merrimack, pushback from state and local leaders. And so we do know that people are opposed to this.
I also think it's interesting that he mentioned local leaders since, as you mentioned, as we've seen, people push back against it. I think they've made their opinions very clear about how they stand. And I think it's just very stupid to even consider, or I guess reconsider, the idea of adding an ice facility in Merrimack or in New Hampshire in general. We don't want it here. I don't think anyone does. And it's just going to bring a lot of harm to our communities.
Right, and I think the sentiment expressed in the editorial is definitely one talking about, the facilities in their current state. We don't necessarily know if it's a good thing to have new ones really anywhere in the country, but also it really especially doesn't make sense in a state like New Hampshire, which is just so far removed from any concerns revolving around the southern border, even if that is like a top of mind issue for you and that's something that you consistently think about. It's not really, it's kind of detached from a lot of things, and sort of having it as like a hub for ice, in the New England region just doesn't really seem like it makes a lot of sense. So kind of the overall opinion expressed is that no matter how you slice it, it kind of falls flat and doesn't really, it just shouldn't really happen is what we were trying to say with this editorial. But I think we got that across pretty well. And it is sort of just continuously seeing stuff with immigration in the news, but it is just such a pertinent topic and new things coming out every day. Unfortunately, in most cases, bad news about various cases that are happening, and we did our own reporting on the more local one. So it's something that we do have to keep talking about, I think, and is important to use our platform for that. With that being said, though, we can jump into our top story in A&E on a lighter note here. We got a piece from our staffer, Michael, about faculty members who are also musicians. So we got a few interviews in this piece from Mike Wakefield from the journalism department, from Kirk Sanger in the nursing department, and from Jeff Coulter in the film department, all of whom play music in their free time. Jeff Coulter is part of a band. Kirk Sanger is a multi-instrumentalist. I know he's also spoken at the NAFME Club, the National Association for Music Educators. I know he kind of is involved a little bit with, the music department, sort of knows him well. So I think it's just really interesting perspective to see, not a lot of people necessarily think when they have a class what their, professor might do in their free time. But sometimes there's some hidden talents or cool little hobbies. And I think this piece sort of does a good job at sort of educating people about, behind the scenes, what these people are interested in. I think it's just a really cool story.
I think it's interesting how not all the professors you mentioned are necessarily affiliated with the music and theater department. I think that's really interesting to think about, how a journalism teacher that you could have classes with every day could also be a musician on the side, and you would never know. I agree that really just raises questions in my head about my teacher's hobbies and what they do on the side that I never even really considered. But I think that's so fascinating that they're just all musicians, and I never even knew that about them.
Right, yeah, I think, we always just try to find those, interesting angles for stories. I think this is one that's an idea that's been talked about before quite a bit, but we never just got around to it. And we figured with an issue like this coming back from spring break, it's not super timely, but it is, just an interesting thing again. So I encourage you, if you're listening, to go check that out. A great piece from our staffer, Michael, again. With that being said, let's get into our sports top story. So this is a piece from our staffer, Frank, and this is about the ski season in New Hampshire, how that's gone as sort of winter has officially wound down. Spring is upon us. There's not really much snow anymore, so, mixed opinions on that depending on who you are. But in any case, When it comes to the ski season, we got some input here from the outing club ski coordinator and sort of what they had going on over the semester. They had a few trips to local mountains, and so overall, just talking about a hobby that maybe not a lot of people partake in, but those who do are really passionate about it. And sort of it's another one of those sports stories where it's not really necessarily about any team in particular, but more so about a sporting related topic. But in a state like New Hampshire, up north, we have pretty significant winters, and we have a lot of resources for those who do like to go ski. So I think it's a really interesting piece.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to wrap it up as we go into the warmer weather and welcome spring. Just a final send off to the ski season and seeing what everyone's been up to lately this past semester and gain their opinions on it. And I think it's great that we got to talk to the outing club because I'm sure they're planning other things as we go into the warmer weather. But no, I hope I get a chance to ski. I'm not a native of New Hampshire, but I would love to get the chance at one point or another while I'm going to school here because it is really important to just New Hampshire civilians.
Right, yeah, and sort of Plymouth is always beating us out when it comes to the skiing population, but maybe one day we'll catch up. But in any case, that's it for our news recap this week. Thanks for tuning in as always, and I would like to extend a special shout out to the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum, Zach Keenan, to the creator of the graphic for